everyone, Arlesia here, and welcome to another video. Today is going to be a big one. It's going to be big physically, it's going to be big mentally and emotionally because we have a lot to unpack, literally, and also whatever the non-literal term would be for we have a lot to talk about. So today we are going to be taking a look at this very large set of jelly gouache from the brand MIYA. And I'm not exactly sure. I feel like in ye olden days of when these jelly gouache first starting to gain popularity, we were using, or at least I was using, like MIYA, those two brand names kind of interchangeably. And I know that somebody explained to me at some point what the difference is, but I don't remember at this point. So these all say MIYA on them. And I know there is some distinction, but they're very similar. So anyway, great start so far. So today I have this giant set to show you of 56 colors. I actually bought this set back in June. It was just an impulse purchase. I bought it myself. It wasn't sent to me by the company or anything. And I put it away in a cabinet for a few months because at first it was because I was working on other things. And then in my mind, it just started to become this gargantuan task to, do what I'm doing today, which is to film the process of opening all of them, trying them out, letting you know what I think of them. And it was finally time. It was finally time to get them out, to open them up. And it felt like a bigger deal to open these because once they're open, they're all open and it's a lot of colors. And I do have my 24 color jelly gouache set that I really love. So part of me was like, oh man, I really don't need this larger set yet. But there are other options in the form of there's things you can do with these. We'll talk about that very soon. So let's start with my initial impressions. The set is massive. I wanted to show you me holding it in the very beginning so you could get kind of a better sense of the scale of this because it's just so huge. And you'll see more of this in a few minutes or however long it takes me to open all of these colors. But the palette is just massive. And a palette isn't even really the right word because this very, very huge container of jelly gouache actually doesn't even come with a mixing surface. So in the other jelly gouache sets I've shown on this channel, they usually come with like a mixing palette. And this one is so huge and it does not. And I think there is a reason for that. I have a feeling that it primarily has to do with the fact that they don't necessarily intend for you to have all of the colors out at once and pulling from, all of them, which we'll talk about why that's one of the drawbacks of this set very soon. But because they kind of expect you to pull out, anywhere from 1 to 2 to 6 or 7 colors at a time and make your own smaller limited palettes and then cycle through those, I guess the goal isn't to make it so that the whole set can be out in front of you at once. And when you're trying to do that, it gets really difficult because then you have this massive tray of 56 colors and a mixing palette, separate mixing palette that you have to already have. And whatever paper you're working on, whatever materials you're working with. And for me, especially because I was filming, it was difficult to have everything out at once. The set is just so massive. And these are the sorts of things that I knew before purchasing this. And another one of the reasons why it took so long to get them all out, because I knew that it was going to just be a big endeavor. So I guess it could sound so far like I'm complaining about these, which I'm not doing exclusively. One thing that I really like about sets with lots of colors, I've talked about this before, is I find it's really helpful for creativity. So being able to take 2 or 3 colors and do little experiments and then testing out what little limited palettes I can make. And there's so many options, there's such a wide variety of options with a palette like this that it's actually really fun to just take a few colors and make little limited palettes. Now that's not something that you necessarily need to do because, the classic art mantra is that if you have primary colors, you can do anything. And that's very true. But I can see the appeal of having pre-mixed colors as well as some interesting unique ones like the neon colors. And, the variety's cool. So there's fun things to try there. From what I can see, I wasn't able to see, at least on the primary listing, I wasn't able to see any pigment information for these colors, and it doesn't appear to be on the lids of these. So you're kind of just going in blind, using the colors as is. There can still be a lot of joy in that, I think. But it does, of course, provide limitations and drawbacks when you're trying to create higher quality work, for which, of course, I think you should just get higher quality gouache in fewer tubes, and that's kind of not necessarily the point of a set like this. It's just to have fun with, to explore with, to be able to put a lot of paint down on the paper in an inexpensive way, and these sorts of sets have always shined with that sort of thing. I did want to try putting the lid on now that the gouache was open. That was something that I was also afraid of, and I was worried that the paint would stick to the foam layers on the inside of the lid, which is made, I know, to make it more airtight so the paint lasts longer, but it does draw a bit of paint up, and I've opened and closed the lid a few times now, and every time I have been seeing like a little bit more bits and bits of paint on the lid. So that's something to keep in mind. If you put the lid on the same way every time, it won't be a huge deal because you won't be like contaminating colors, but just again, another thing to keep in mind. As always, when I'm sharing a specific product with you all, I want to do like a finished painting so you can see these paints in action. And with a very large set like these, I wasn't particularly interested in swatching all of the colors, especially because I found a lot with the jelly gouache that the color tends to not shift as much from when it's wet. So the color that you see is oftentimes, basically what it dries as. These paints do vary from more traditional gouache in that way, as well as in the final finish of the paint and the consistency of it while you're working with it. I found that the jelly gouache, especially this set, tends to dry a bit shinier, and there were way more like streaky colors where I had to do a lot more layering to get like a nice solid coat. So I guess to kind of sum up my overall thoughts on whether or not you should buy this set, maybe you've been eyeing it, maybe you've been seeing all of these different colors and thinking it was really appealing and wondering if you should pick it up. My thoughts are really just get the 24 color set or the 18 color set. I really like the white palette that comes in the 24 color set, and you're still getting a little bit like quote unquote spoiled with having lots of different colors to choose from, and there's still some of those pastel colors that I really like. I think that's maybe the biggest drawing feature of this palette for me is, some of those really unique mixed colors. Like there's lots of really interesting greens and blues and like red, pink sorts of shades in this, but I think that you could very easily mix those colors and ultimately end up with a nicer consistency. This happens a lot in paints where there's very large sets. I talked about it when I was reviewing way back, like 2 or 3 years ago, Arteza's 60 color, I think it was 60 color gouache set. I think I mentioned when I talked about that set that even though it was 60 colors, there were only like somewhere between 18 and 20 different pigments used. So ultimately you could just buy the 24 color set and have like cleaner, like more higher quality individual colors. And I think the same goes for this set. Some of the colors, like the tried and true ones that I know are already in my smaller sets, like that Prussian blue, there's a Viridian green that I like, there's a warm reddish orange color in both of the sets that I really like, and I found myself kind of leaning on those colors that I already knew I enjoyed from the smaller sets Also because their consistency was reliable. With this set, when you just have so many different colors, and they're, especially when they're just subtle variations on each other, you get a larger quantity of colors. But I found in some sets, and it's the same with this, that more quantity results in lower quality. So like I said earlier, I found myself running into streakiness way more often, and you'll be able to see it as this painting progresses, that working in thick layers, which is something I really love with paints like this, because it's just part of the joy of having access to such large quantities and being able to play with things and try them. And I want to be able to like throw larger quantities of paint down, but it did leave a streakier finish. Now, at the same time, I do still think that these paints, the jelly gouache, is really great for learning how to work with gouache or an opaque medium, because it's an easy, cheap way to mix colors and see how they layer on top of each other and to blend colors together. All of that you can learn from this without spending a ton of money, especially if you get the smaller sets. So I really do think, as a learning tool and for just having fun with and sitting down and playing with, there's a lot of fun to be had with the jelly gouache. I just don't think that this set in particular is doing very much for me, especially in comparison to like the 24 color set. So when I compare the pros and cons of this set, the pros being that creativity boost of having access to lots of different colors and being able to build these fun little limited palettes, that's always a positive for me. But when I sit that next to the negative of the paint quality that I felt was kind of lacking in this one, I don't know why it would be different specifically from the smaller sets. So maybe there's more mixing of like lots of multi-pigment colors, or there's more filler. I don't know what it is, but I definitely noticed a difference myself in just the quality of the paints with lots and lots of colors like this. In my scale of ranking like art supplies that you can learn on versus art supplies that get in your way, I don't think that these fall all the way over in, okay, these are just gonna get in your way, don't even buy them. I don't think that this is the sort of thing where you could go, I want to try gouache, and for some reason you decide to get this really massive set of paints, which that's okay. I mean, I know when I was really first excited about art supplies, I got big sets that were bigger than I needed. So if you end up in that boat and you go, I want to try gouache, I want to learn, first of all, I would recommend the 24 color set over this one. But if you do want to get this one and you end up with it, I don't think it's going to get in your way of learning how to work with opaque, water-soluble mediums. I think that you could still have a lot of fun with it. And if you decide that you want to upgrade to higher quality gouache, then you can go with like a more professional brand like M. Graham, which is a gouache brand that I really like. I think it is still fun to learn on. If you're used to professional quality, like higher quality gouache, you will absolutely notice the difference. I would be really interested to know if there's anyone else out there who has tried the smaller Himi gouache sets as well as this larger one, and if you have found any differences in the quality of them, or maybe you prefer the larger set, and I would love to hear what you think if anyone else has tried these. I suppose I should actually talk about the painting that I'm painting, and I know I say this all the time, but I'm really grateful that it's always true. I had a lot of fun working on this painting. I did a little thumbnail next to the thumbnail from last week's painting, and they looked pretty similar, I think, in my opinion. I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see how these paintings are not actually similar, because even though the thumbnails, felt like kind of alike, I knew that I wanted something different for this piece, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I will be scanning this one in, or I have already scanned this one in, and it's going to be the Patreon mini print for the month of January 2022, which is somehow coming really soon. So you do have about a little over a week to sign up over on Patreon if you would like to get a mini print of this painting. I usually do mini prints in an exclusive way, so that will be the only way to get a small print of this painting. I will also be listing the original for sale on my shop with some special tips about how to take care of this painting, because it is made with jelly gouache, which generally tend to be a little bit less light fast. I've seen some tests where people have still said, yep, it's still light fast, it's still good. But because I don't have pigment information, I just want to, do my best to provide some tips on how to take care of it just in case. And I almost forgot to mention that I was really close to giving up on this painting. I did the first few layers on the first day, and I remember leaving the studio thinking, oh man, I'm gonna have to start this one over. I had sort of an ambitious goal as far as the lighting that I wanted to try to convey with this painting. It's something that I haven't really done very often, but it was in my brain and I thought it would be really fun and could create a really interesting piece. And I tried it and walked away that first day going, darn it, I'm gonna have to restart that painting. And when I came into the studio the second day, I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. I think I can pull this off. So I came back to it with fresh eyes and a renewed spirit, and it worked, I think. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I do think I suffered a little bit from, like I talked about with this set, having access to too many colors. So I think that the color palette could have been more cohesive if I had used fewer colors, which really would have just been a matter of taking a few out and sticking to them. But I didn't do that. So I ended up using more colors than I would have if the set was smaller. Potentially you could still overuse too many colors, or two, if I had just taken like a few colors out. So I think that this piece showcases the paints pretty well in terms of what you can do with them, which is still a lot, and you can still have fun and make art that you like. And the limitations or the individual characteristics of this paint are still present. This painting looks a little bit shinier and finished. For whatever reason, the thicker consistency of the paint warped my paper a ton, and I've used thicker paint like acrylics and gouache and things on paper like this before, and this is just an astounding amount of warping, especially since I allowed the paints to dry completely on the block before I took it off, which is what I always do, and this is a ton of warping. So that's things to keep in mind. Overall, I like what I make with these paints, but I would recommend a smaller set. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you've tried them. And I really do want to hear your opinions on this super massive set. As always, a huge thank you to my members here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. We've been making lots of exclusive content over there, and in the coming weeks, I'm going to have some really exciting exclusive things to share with you guys that I won't be able to share on YouTube publicly for a little while. So you can check out those platforms if you want to see some exciting new things that are coming. And thank you all so much for watching this video. You can find the original for sale on my shop or sign up over on Patreon before the end of December to get a mini print. And I will talk to you all next week. Okay, bye-bye.